when I think about engagements that didn't work well, that's usually what happened. The expectation setting was not appropriate. We didn't do a good enough job setting expectations and saying, no, we don't want this work when they pushed back, or they were a little too early stage. So I would say, know exactly who you are. Sit down, write it down, write your messaging and positioning. It's so hard to do. It's so hard to do, but it's so hard to walk away from business.
Hi, everyone. This is Joshua Hoffman and Alex Gerashenko, and welcome to another episode of the Masters in Marketing Agency podcast, where we deconstruct the why and how agency owners found their success, and in season 3, discuss how to build a community and referral network. Today, I have Amy Winner, the co-founder and head of strategy and development of Wheels Up Collective, a full-service boutique marketing agency that specializes in helping B2B tech companies grow. Welcome, Amy.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Of course. And so I want to open up with your first job, which was at age 12, I believe, is what you shared last time. And it was a horse grooming business. So I have to know, how did you get into that? And did you learn anything from that business that you ended up bringing to your current business?
Well, like every little girl when she's 4 or 5 wants a pony, and I was one of the brats who got one. So, I have horses in my blood. It's what keeps me working so I can play at the barn. But I started grooming my own horses when I was young because I was a barn rat and wanted to do it myself. And, my parents said, if you want to do this sport, it's expensive. You got to figure out how to pay for it. And so I started hustling the other people at the barn and, doing some work for them and built up quite the clientele base. And ultimately ended up making enough money to put a down payment on my first house when I was, I think, 25. So it was quite lucrative. But I think it's just grit. Like, I'd love to say that so much of work is talent and inspiration, but if you don't have like the hustle and the grit to just grind through it, I think that you're destined to fail. Maybe fail slowly, but it's definitely started at a young age, and I think I still carry the same grit torch with me every day. But yeah.
Well, I think that's an important word, grit, because it might come up in this next question, which is, fast forwarding a few years to college, where you weren't just an athlete, you were, and I wrote in this note, a freaking national champion, which is unbelievable. So, what I want to understand is, do you actually look to hire former athletes? And if so, why? What do you think that a lot of athletes have that maybe other people don't? Well, I shouldn't say it like that, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Especially, I'm talking about like high caliber athletes, like not kids who did, like little league soccer, or little league t-ball, I think that in order to survive, especially at a collegiate level or post-collegiate, development level, like you have to balance so much in your life, and you have to know how to prioritize, and you just have to be able to like grit your teeth and get through it. And in our space, we work with startups, and a lot of startups is just, it's a race. It's a race to get to the finish line of having a, MVP at, your minimum viable product, that has product market fit in time before you run out of money. So a lot of it is just grit. And I think that athletes, especially team athletes, they're used to shifting. They're used to being able to be put in situations where they can, pick up something new and contribute. And most athletes don't just kind of, this is a terrible analogy, but like sit on the bench and wait to be told what to do. So I love hiring a good athlete. Plus, we're all a little bit like masochistic, a little bit like we've all kind of like beaten ourselves up to in the name of loving the sport. And so I think our pain tolerance is a little bit higher.
I hear you there. I went on this hike in Colorado, and at the very top, I was miserable. It was like wind in my face and everything. I was like, man, I just love this. And there is something to that mentality,
right?
Of being comfortable in the uncomfortable, I think, is a phrase that's usually said a lot.
Yeah, there's going to be plenty of moments.
Yeah,
where...
I think.
No, go ahead.
I think too, like so much of work is staving off procrastination. And like, it's so easy to get lulled into, like we're constantly getting bombarded with alerts and, other distractions. And you just have to be able to like put your head down and get it done. And I think that at least for me, it seems, especially if you're a student athlete, like you have a lot on your plate and you just don't have time to procrastinate. And I think that just sets rigor in your life early on. That is a habit that like, you only build on that. You don't usually become a procrastinator later in life. So I think that's one of the things that I'm super thankful about from being involved in athletics.
Yeah, it was cool during our discovery call. You mentioned you like to surround yourself with other winners because you love being competitive. And that I thought it was cool, just the mentality that if you surround yourself with people that are tenacious, curious, you can teach them everything else.
Totally. So I can teach somebody how to run ads. I can teach somebody how to write better. I can't teach them how to want to win. And absolutely. I always want to be like the dumbest person in the room.
I think there's a meme that goes around that's like, these skills are free, and it's like showing up on time and all that kind of stuff. Like it doesn't take it. Mm-hmm. I forget what they all say, but I always think that was a really good post that goes around is like, there's so many things that you don't need to be smart and that are free to do and will get you 80% of the way there. And then
80%. Yeah.
And just look for a good leader to get you that last 20%. And there you go. You have you're a good professional kind of thing. Or a good goal setter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now that we kind of talked a lot about, pre-Wheels Up Collective, now we'll jump into Wheels Up Collective. Can you tell us a little bit more about the agency and how it started?
Yeah. So I had spent 12 years in the Seattle startup world and worked at a bunch of different early stage and pivoting companies and just absolutely loved the pace. I ended up moving back to the East Coast to deal with some family stuff in 2018 and ended up this like behemoth company, this huge company that was very corporate and it just sucked the life out of me. I hated it. It was so slow. There were so many layers. There was so much politicking. It just was not a good fit for me. And coincidentally, my now co-founder, who I had worked with in Seattle, had gone through the exact same situation where she was at a huge company and it just kind of hated it. And so, we're in the throngs of the early days of COVID lockdown, and we're chatting, and everybody's getting into like sourdough starters and gardening, and we're like, hey, let's start an agency. It can be our COVID project. And it was perfect timing for us because all these companies were racing to get to digital. They're racing to digital distribution. They were racing to get to a digital presence, a bigger digital footprint. All these new tools were coming up. Like, remember, like nobody really knew what Zoom was, the general public didn't know what Zoom was before the pandemic. And so there was just this huge gap of talent out there to help companies adopt a more digital forward footprint or strategy. And so we actually had people reaching out to us, that colleagues from the Seattle world saying, like, hey, can you help with this? Can you help with this? And next thing you know, we got the gang back together. I called my favorite team of people who coincidentally, like, no one had a full-time job. Like everybody had kind of been like, downsized, or we had a couple, 2 women that had babies. Somebody went back to school. Somebody was taking a sabbatical. Like everybody on my dream team needed a little side hustle. And so Wheels Up was born, and we've kind of been running ever since. So
how did you guys get your first customer?
It was all through referrals. It kind of like fell in our laps a little bit. They were all people, and still to this day, all of our customers are either first or second degree connections. So I think Elise and I were just lucky that we have really good networks from being in Seattle. And, I 1000% believe that people work with people who they like, like that's the most important, or people who they feel comfortable with, like even more than skill set. People like to work with people who they trust. And so we were able to build certainly the first 2 years worth of customers just off of first degree referrals, friends that we knew, people who we'd worked with before. And so it's nice. It gives you that instant credibility and that instant trust. And so you don't have to spend the first month or two just kind of doing something to have some results to show. You can say like, hey, we're going to slow roll this. We're going to do it the right way. And, we understand that your marketing plan needs infrastructure, like nobody gets excited about putting a new roof on their house, but you need the roof. So, a lot of the projects that we were tackling were putting the roof on the house, and we were lucky that we had customers who trusted us enough that that was the right thing to do right now, instead of something a little flashier or more public promotion.
Were those first clients, you had mentioned most of your clients now, if not all, are early stage startups that have gotten product market fit. Were those first clients those also, or did it evolve into that somehow?
Yeah. No, it was always that. And, along the way, we've ended up having a few clients here and there that were a little bit later stage. And some of them worked and some of them didn't. It just kind of depended on what infrastructure they had, and, what projects they had. But I think that what makes that segment interesting to us is, Elise and I together collectively had worked with dozens of agencies when we were at startups, and they were all terrible because they didn't understand two things. They didn't understand the pace. I don't want to have a meeting about the meeting and then get a document that recap the meeting that I want to go. And then the other thing was there's constantly this balance between how do we get something that's good enough for right now, but also has the bones to be able to scale in 6 months or in a year when you close another funding round, or when, you catch lightning in a bottle a little bit. You need to have the infrastructure to support that. And so I think that those are two things that we bring to the table that a lot of agencies don't or can't, because they haven't actually lived it, is that that balancing act and time to market for marketing programs.
So dealing with such early stage startups, did you see tighter budgets? And then Alex, I see you in my little note thing. Was there something you wanted to add to that?
I was going to say, tighter budgets and potentially non-recurring revenue.
Absolutely tighter budgets. I mean, but also, some of these ad budgets are absurd. These marketing budgets, these agency budgets are just absurd. It breaks my heart a little bit how much money is set on fire at agencies. So I think that our budgets are usually lean, but they certainly are not unreasonable as a percentage of revenue or as a percentage of the funding that they get in. Sure, I'd love to have twice as much budget, but I think that a tight budget also forces you to be more prescriptive and to really think things through a little bit more. So I'd like to think that it helps us make better decisions when we have a budget gun to our heads a little bit, figuring out how to make that money grow. And, one of my soapbox issues is that you've got to get marketing out of the red and into the black as quickly as possible. For decades and decades and decades, marketing was just a black hole of expense. And now we have the technology to prove the impact of marketing. And so I'm a huge advocate of partnering with the CFO or, whoever's in charge of your books, and really figuring out how are they measuring impact? How can we align with that? How can we start to show the value of the marketing dollars? How can we get to a predictive state where if you tell me I have this much money in programs, I'm going to deliver this much in opportunity in this many quarters? Because I've never had a CFO tell me no when I go to them with that kind of data and say, hey, I need more money. So I think that that's always what we're striving for, is getting that and I think in B2B SaaS, you can do that. Most of the revenue comes in as ARR, and it's very cyclical. It's very, you can anticipate, it's predictable. And so I think you can get, Gartner invented however many millions of years ago, the reverse waterfall. You can get to a point where it's a predictable funnel. And if you have the right people in place in marketing and sales and customer success, you can predict it. And CFOs love that, so anything you can do from an agency perspective to help show your work and show your impact in dollars and cents, it's only going to help you get more budget. And honestly, I don't want to waste money. I don't want to spend a cent on a program that isn't working. So, I think that having a little more rigor around your accountability is a good thing. And maybe a tight budget does that to you. But hey, if they want to give me more money, I'll spend it. But and I think you were talking about a repeatable revenue. I think that that's probably the case with any projects or any engagement. If it's not going well, they're not going to rehire you. So I'd like to think that our business is easier to lose than like government business. But, I think if you do a good job, I don't think you're going to be a good fit for everyone forever. And that's okay. We'd love to see a client like get so big that they hire a big internal team and they don't need help anymore because it was so wildly successful. But, we've been able to grow with clients pretty successfully, I think.
There's, I want to dive into this. We haven't asked with the amount of marketing agency owners we've interviewed, we've never actually asked this question. But given your space in B2B tech, there's always chatter and, different ways to do growth hacks. Is there a portion of your marketing business that maybe is not as predictable, but is kind of like a shot in the dark and, like a really creative growth hack that maybe the CFO is potentially a little bit weary of, but is willing to try it? Like, does your team get into those type of scenarios as well? Or is it?
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. I mean, we're always trying to look for, let's face it, I don't know how many like silver bullets there are out there. I think that most silver bullets have a lot of grit behind them, that maybe you don't see. But, I think that we love to test out new ideas. Like I'll test any idea, but I think you have to go into it with like, here's the hypothesis, here's the plan we're going to use to test it, here's the time frame, and here's the results. And we're going to sit down, we're going to look at the results and figure out like why it went one way or the other, not just did it go one way or the other. And then, you scale from there. But one of the things that we feel is super important with new clients is to make sure that we pretty immediately are running some sort of program to try and drive demand. There's always something right away that, it might be one small AdWords campaign, but like something to start testing because, with a tight budget, a lot of times, the real world is a better way to test things than a sandbox and hypotheses. And so, I think if we can use real live campaigns or real live, initiatives to test things and just be set up with that cadence to check in, iterate, scale, shift. A lot of times that's the only way to get that speed I was talking about before.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And to change course a little bit and now to get on, the topic of community, people clearly trusted you enough to, during the pandemic to join this new company that maybe didn't even have customers at the time. And so you clearly did something right there. And then you also mentioned previously that, you were a community manager at your previous job. So like, what's your trick? What's your trick?
I think, I think I said this before, like I worked at a public sector startup. We sold enterprise data management to government technologists. And government was an easy space, easy-ish space to build community because it's not competitive. Everybody's very collaborative in governments, like, especially if your neighboring town is doing something that's working, like your mayor wants to do it too. And so I think that while that's not necessarily the case in the private sector, there are ways that you can connect people in a non-competitive way. Like you can find that nexus of commonality or connection. And, I think, social media, I think, has made connections very disingenuous and, like the whole Instagram versus reality. And I think if you approach that community building with, humanity and just being genuine and helping people first and making good connections, like it goes a long way. And I think when you're first building your community, you have to pick the right people to be the first people in there, right? Like you have to pick the rock star customers that you have have the right personality to be collaborative and warm and welcoming and, reach out and kind of like pull everybody into the fray. I think, or pull people in from the fray, I think that's really important. So we started at Socrata, we started having these regional meetups. This was in person. And, we picked customers to help co-host them. And they had great networks and they were able to reach out and like get the right people in the room. And, then once I think people met and had one-to-one conversations, it grew from there. We had the user groups turned into our user conference, which after we ran it for the 4 years for 4 years when I was there, it turned into a week-long event that had over 1,000 people involved with it. It had, a data camp. It had a hackathon. It had user groups, like boot camps for users. It had thought leadership, but it's finding you can't throw all those people in one room together. You have to figure out what's important to them and figure out where the commonalities are and curate content and experiences that is resonant with them and relevant. And you can't do it. That didn't happen in the first year. You have to take a little bite piece of it first. First we worked with the developers, then we worked with the users. So it's a lot of slog work. You have to slog through it. But I think finding the right personalities to connect, people who are likable, people who are helpful, and get them on your team is a great first step.
Was that slog? Was that the word you said?
Slog. You got to slog through it.
That might be the first slog reference on the podcast. So.
Grit, slog, yeah. Well. So, it's interesting. As I was talking about that, we tried at Socrata, we tried this. It was a special app. This was in 2019 before Instagram was a total hit or Facebook was really huge, but it was a specific gamified, online community. And it was flop. I was the first one to say, I'm kind of surprised this was a flop. It had really cool features. You could win prizes. It was, we were people are going to love this. And they didn't. They wanted to have a meetup in person. They wanted to talk to each other in person. They didn't want to message each other back and forth. They wanted to have a real life connection. They didn't want to do it because they got points. They wanted to do it because they were going to learn something from each other. And I think that that was very telling, right? Because on paper, it should have worked. It should have worked great. It should have been a great compliment to what we were doing in real life, but it was kind of a flop.
I'm happy you shared that. I think that was great. And, a lot of that is building the community with your peers, and maybe, coworkers and stuff, but now you're the leader. And, I don't know what your experience is with churn within the employees at your company, but marketing agencies churn is usually typically pretty high because the poaching happens a lot of times because it's similar skill level or skill sets, and then they just offer 10,000 more and they're doing the same job. So is there anything you do to build the community within your company itself and your employees and everything?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've lost one employee and he had two babies. Or his family had two new babies, and he's a stay-at-home dad now. But we've been really lucky with churn. We haven't lost people because I think that I like to think of the Venn diagram of what is somebody good at, what are they interested in, and what does the company need? And you have to find that sweet spot. You have to make sure that at least 80% of what they're focusing on fits kind of in that sweet spot. Because if people are working on things that they don't care about or they're not good at, okay, if people are working on things they don't care about, you can get a little bit of runway out of them, right? But at some point they're going to be this is miserable. If people are working on things that they're not good at, it's a lot of work to support them and get them up leveled, which maybe you have the time to do, or maybe you don't have the time to do, and maybe they're interested in or they're not. But I think you have to understand what motivates people to come to work every day, especially with the Gen Zers. And, I feel old saying this, but, am I allowed to curse on this podcast? They have no room in their life for BS. None. They're not tolerating it. They're not tolerating, they're just not tolerating it. And I commend them for that. I commend them for the attention to mental health and, that it's easy to talk about hey, I need a mental health day today, great. Thank you for saying that and taking the day off. We'll cover for you and get yourself, rejuvenated and back tomorrow or whatever. I think that, we try and create a space where everybody loves to come to work. We're distributed by design, which is a very important part of Wheels Up's value prop to our team members. We have created a virtual environment where we've got the technology in place that what your job is. And I don't really care when you do it. You can do it at 2:00 in the morning if you want to do it. You can do it from a beach if you want to do it. You can do it around your kids' soccer schedule if you want to do it that way. I'm a night owl. I am very productive from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. And so I know what I need to get done. And, we trust the people that work with us and, they know when it's due and they can do it however fits with their schedule. And I think that is a huge draw, especially for Gen Zers.
100%. Yeah, we operate in the same way. As long as you hit your goals, doesn't matter when you do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't care if you're sitting at a desk from 8 to 5. It's stupid.
The interesting piece there that we've had to work around is you don't necessarily need to be at your desk, but be available for communication if something crazy comes up within a reasonable time. That was the only kind of thing that we had to address, because I mean, dealing in the tech space, there's bugs that come up, and if there's something that comes up on production, we need to dive in immediately. But generally, people work whenever from wherever. I mean, our team's fully distributed. But I wanted to get back into the community conversation. You said something that I thought was really great. You said it's about helping people first and finding and picking the right first people. And then if I heard you correctly, did the community evolve kind of initially? You had the one-on-one conversation, you set up the one-on-one conversation, so there was value built there. And then I guess once there was enough one-on-one relationships built, only then did you kind of introduce more group events? And if I'm understanding that correctly or not, can you just go into more detail there?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the time we had our customer success group, which was helping everybody from implementation on, was getting built out. There was a little bit more rigor around that. We were a little bit more mature. And, one of the things that the CSMs, the customer success managers, they had built great relationships one-on-one. We had really good CSMs that were doing really good work. And they were building those relations. And we had good sellers too. Like we were already from selling, we had good connections with customers. I think everybody in your company needs to be a good people person, like care about the people who you're talking to, which is kind of ridiculous that we have to say that, but it's kind of true. So we had those one-on-one relationships just from sales and from CS. And, there were a lot of, since it was a software company, there were a lot of technical questions coming up that the CSMs maybe couldn't answer. And so we were starting to pull in dev. We had, like community dev managers, that were working with customers. And so, we started with these user groups, and it was just get people together to meet. We'd usually have one customer, one key customer who we had a great relationship with, give a little talk. And I kind of forgot about this, but one of my favorite things, these user groups, like they were quarterly, we had, 10 or 12 regions around the country that were going all the time. And, we started offering up these lightning talks where you could get up and you could talk for 5 minutes about anything you wanted. It didn't even have to be about our software or like the topic of the user group. But it always was. And we had like months long waiting lists to do these lightning talks. And it was, we always recorded them because it was marketing gold. They're up there talking about it in an excited way, fun slides, they just like really brought these like pretty boring stories to life. And so I think somehow if you can capture that excitement from the community, then it became like, who's doing the lightning talk this month? Like who, we got to the point where we kind of promote those. And they were great marketing pieces to share out. And then that trickled into our user conference when we had, the 3-day long user conference. In between the big sessions, we do lightning talks. And so, I'm telling you, we had a waiting list to get on those lightning talks. People like to share their stories. So it definitely caught fire a little bit.
Very cool. Yeah. And now you're having user generated content there as well that people can put it on their schedules. And then also you can post it on social media to further expand the community. That's really cool.
I kind of wish we had TikTok. I kind of wish we had TikTok back then for that, because it would, like that kind of platform would have been perfect for it. But
go into that more, because we've been talking about what platforms we should be using for the community. Obviously, Slack came up, potentially Discord, potentially Facebook groups. But yeah, why TikTok?
Well, I think it's like, so it's so addictive. Like, which one of us wouldn't admit that like at 2:00 in the morning we're scrolling through like TikTok because the algorithm has it figured out, So I think like, especially, in industries where you wouldn't think TikTok would be a hit, like we've had clients use it and it's a small slice. It's a small slice of people, but if you reach the right people, it's not that expensive to do. We actually have a TikTok celebrity on the Wheels Up team. She's like an accidental TikTok celebrity. She ended up like 1 million followers without trying. And so she's been super helpful in helping us give great advice for how to create good TikTok content for clients. But I think like those bite-sized video, it's those lightning talks just would have fit in that format so well. It would have been so easy to scroll through those and just hear the highlights of those, because they were 5 minutes. You only had 5 minutes to do it. So you had to get to the point real fast.
How often would you have those lightning talks? Was it like once a week, once a month, random days?
We had them at all the user groups. Yeah, we had them at the user groups. It was like, I think we did, usually at the user groups, we had like one presentation that was about like some topic, that was maybe like 20 minutes. It was usually co-hosted with a client. So the client was kind of telling the story and the CSM was sort of interviewing them. And then we would have, 3 to 5 lightning talks. And then we'd have like a product component of the user group, since they were all users, like here are updates, here's a glimpse into the product roadmap, here's, and then it was a two-way conversation about like, what do you think about the product? Where can you give some feedback? And I think that's actually a really important part of a corporate community, is like, it can't be one way. You gotta listen to your clients, to your customers and your community members, and like making sure that that is available in a very authentic way, and that there's a space to give feedback, so people want to feel like they're being heard, right? Like if I'm giving you my feedback, I want you to hear it and do something about it. So, it was a great platform for that two-way conversation. Very
cool. Kind of going full circle. And so we asked these questions towards the end of all season 3 episodes. Is you mentioned that you built your business initially from referrals. So we go into asking, who do you get referrals from typically? And then who do you then give referrals to? So obviously, you don't touch all aspects of the marketing. Yep. So how does that work in your company?
You're taking my final questions? Is that what you're doing right now? Sorry.
Do you want to re-record it? You can ask the question.
We can edit out my piece, and then you can.
Let's do a bake-off. Who can deliver the question better? And that person ends up in the podcast.
Sorry, Alex, I didn't mean to interrupt if you wanted to ask the actual question mark on the end of that. Did you have the... Did you want
me to jump in? Sorry.
Yeah, Amy.
No, that was all me. All right. So what I will say then is, and I'll basically ask that question is, first of all, I just want to say that we put a lot of this on YouTube Shorts, and that's where we get our thousands of views on, is really on YouTube Shorts. So clearly this type of medium does make really good for short form content. And then my fear with the, this community that we're trying to build is like, I don't want it to just be a round table, right? Like I don't want to, which are great and they're valuable, but like, there's so much more that you can even get just from the content that's said during the round table and everything. So, I think, putting it in different mediums and different aspects, kind of just to bring attention to the community, I think is very good. Sorry, Alex, did you have a last question before I get into these last questions?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So yes, like Alex mentioned, we have a few questions that we typically ask at the end. First one being, if you had to teach something to other marketers, what would it be?
Oh, gosh. To any marketer? You need to be more specific.
Oh, no one's ever...
To agency owners, to junior people, to like, I could fill 13 podcasts with that.
That's fair. To, anyone that maybe wants to start an agency, they just start an agency and they're looking to grow.
Yeah. I think you need to know what you're good at. I think like, especially in the early days, it's really easy to want to get like any business that you can. And I get it. Like you just need to get revenue through the door, but the wrong fit is going to slow you down and it's going to waste your time. And it's going to, it's the opportunity cost of the jobs that you missed, and the opportunity cost of time that you didn't spend pitching and building the right relationships. So I would say, know exactly what you want to be. We knew that there was a need for early stage tech startup agency support. And we have stayed mostly laser focused on that. I would say 90% laser focused on that. The times that we have pulled in work that doesn't fit that sweet spot, it's been people who we knew very well and had worked for before, and we knew we were going to, it was going to work out. part of that is knowing how to decipher like if somebody fits that criteria. So like a lot, we've had a couple engagements where somebody fit that description, but they were too early stage, and they or they came in with the wrong expectations. And we kind of spun our wheels a little bit on that. Like when I think about engagements that didn't work well, that's usually what happened. The expectation setting was not appropriate. We didn't do a good enough job setting expectations and saying, no, we don't want this work when they pushed back, or they were a little too early stage. So I would say, know exactly who you are. Sit down, write it down, write your messaging and positioning. It's so hard to do. It's so hard to do, but it's so hard to walk away from business, but really making sure you know exactly what you want to be. And then it's personal relationships. Like people still work with people who they like. So work your network. I believe really strongly in life that, we all have, this is corny, but like we all have superpowers and you have to use some of them for good. So, figure out how you can give back. We always have at least one client who's a pro bono that like, we're not a huge agency. That's a lot for us to do that. But, we always have at least one client who are helping because it's a good cause or because, they need it, so I think that goes a long way. Word of mouth, is still the most valuable channel. I don't care what anybody says. It's the most valuable channel there is.
And again, around this topic of community and referrals, how can you guys work with other agencies or what services can you partner with other agencies?
The things that we are really good at, I think, are content and demand gen. I think like we can build a content plan and crank it out like nobody's business. It's funny because we did a lot of I've done a lot of content in my life. Elise and my co-founder has done a lot of content in her life. And we believe so strongly that high value content backed marketing strategy is like the way to go, especially in B2B marketing. So, we had all these templates and methodologies and frameworks that we use internally. And, at one point we were like, this is an ebook. Like we should create an ebook. So we have a content, how to build a content strategy ebook. It's on our website. Go download it. It's free. It has every Google Doc template you could possibly need to build a very robust content strategy. It kind of spells out like how to bite size it, what to do first, second, third, and so I think that content is something that we're really good at. Demand gen campaigns, like we're good at doing them. That crawl, walk, run, we're going to test it. We're going to get something in market right away. We're going to test it. And then we're going to scale. I think we're pretty good at that. But definitely like you said, you got to know what you're not good at. And like, we've found really good people who can plug most of the holes that we have. But it's hard. It's always hard to keep finding good vendors and good partners and good people.
So similar question, but now I'm going to kind of flip it. If a client asks you, can you do this and it's not a service that you currently provide, how do you typically handle that request?
Mm-hmm. We will refer it out to another, like I'll make a personal, well, first I'll call the person and see if they want the business. Because the worst thing you can do is like volley them over to another vendor and they're like, nope, this isn't us, Mm-hmm. So like, it's about like, but it goes back to that whole like extra step of like giving a good connection, making a good connection, right? Like it's helping somebody. And so, I'll talk to one of our vendor partners. If they can't do it, do they know anybody they would recommend? And like being very transparent when you do that handoff, like, hey, Joe, who we usually work with, can't do it, but he's recommended this person. He'll introduce you. So, it comes back to that like old adage of like helping people out. And I like to check back in too. I like to, put little calendar reminders for check back in with this agency about the engagement. How's it going? How, cause like we keep selling to the same people kind of over and over. So if you can stay connected, even when you've referred business out, I think, one of the things that we do when people refer business to us is try and keep the original referrer connected and top of mind with the client, because like, we want to make sure they get more business too, right? So really having like that, you're like a team mm-hmm. selling marketing to people who need it.
And the give and take.
What were those initial referrals that came in when you first started the business? Who were they coming from? What type of agencies tend to refer business to you most?
Oh, they were all people who we had worked with before. So they were all like people who owned businesses or who worked. They were coming in from eventual clients.
Or what about
still the majority of it comes from people who, I'm sorry, can you say it again?
I was going to ask, is there typically an agency that provides like one type of service? For example, maybe they do PPC or SEO that typically refers to you, or where does it vary?
They kind of vary, like we have a video agency that we absolutely love. Like I don't have videographers on my team, like good, like real videographers. Like we can do little TikTok videos, but like, so we have an amazing video partner who we use, and like we are constantly, we complement each other, right? Like somebody who's going to spend a lot of money, tens of thousands of dollars on video, needs a content strategy behind it. And so like we work well with that. We work with a company that's really quite good at online ads. And so when we have clients that have tens of thousands of dollars per month budgets, we'll have them handle the ad management, just because that's what their people do full time. And so, they'll kick business to us sometimes. We have a PR agency that, will work with. I think when you find other good agencies, they're usually looking for other good agencies. I think, that you end up working with people who are kind of like your same level of goodness. So those referrals, I think, carry a lot of weight. That's the technical term, levels of goodness.
Couple more questions. Are you guys looking to hire any positions right now?
The tech world is tight right now. It has been a tough, 2023 has been tough for tech. So we're a pretty lean team right now. I think we are always looking for good fit people. So if we find somebody who's a really like stellar cultural fit, who's one of those athletes who can kind of like plug in a lot of good places, like we definitely want to talk to them. But we don't have any like specific open headcount right now.
And then last question, and my favorite one, any book or podcast or newsletter recommendations? And that can be in marketing, it can be in business, doesn't have to be, it could be anything you want.
Oh my gosh. My absolute favorite podcast, I cannot get enough of it, is it's called Hard Fork. It's a New York Times technology. You guys know Hard Fork. No, Casey and Kevin, where are you in my life? Like, I need to be friends with you. They take, it's all about, I think it started out as like an mostly AI podcast, but like they take AI news and tech news, which we're in the tech space. I need to know that that's what's going on, but like they make it relevant. They help with that lens for like why you should care about this. And they are just so gosh darn funny. I love them. I do listen to them on 2x speed because everybody I think talks too slow. So I don't know that I would recognize them in real life by their voices because they sound like chipmunks when I listen to them, but their podcast comes out every Friday and I am always listening to it Friday afternoon. It's really good.
We always joke that I'm a very fast talker and Alex is on the slower side. And no, you cannot average us together. That's not how it works, unfortunately. But as we come up to the end of the episode, I just want to give you an opportunity to mention how people can find you and anything else you'd like to end with.
Yeah, so we would love to work with or connect just with great marketers or great potential clients that are in the B2B startup space, tech space. We're at wheelsupcollective.com. You can find us online or on Instagram or all the channels. Wheels Up Collective. We're not on Twitter anymore. X. We've kind of abandoned that platform. But my email is amy@wheelsupcollective. Would love to connect with good people. We can't wait to be part of the community that you're building too. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for coming on the show. And for those of you who've learned something new from this episode, please consider giving us a like or a follow so we can continue getting the highest quality guests. And as always, thank you for listening. Amy, I love this episode. Thank you so much. This is great.
Thank you. It was super fun.
Thanks for listening to the Masters in Marketing Agency podcast. I hope you got a ton of value out of this episode. And before we go, I just want to thank our sponsors, DevNoodle. DevNoodle provides marketing agencies with the ability to offer their clients unlimited website design, build, and management services with fixed monthly plans. If website design, development, and maintenance is holding your agency back from growing, please reach out to us at devnoodle.com, where we make websites easy for you and easy for your clients. devnoodle.com.